This might sound harsh, but what if the loudest voices were never planning to leave at all? In 2016, when Donald Trump won the election, Hollywood reacted instantly. Eddie Griffin said he'd move to Africa. George Lopez warned that everyone would be going back. The statement spread fast, emotional, dramatic, impossible to ignore. But here's the part no one revisits. What actually happened after the cameras stopped rolling? Nothing. No mass exits.
No celebrity exodus.
Just silence where certainty once stood. And that silence raises a question most people avoid. Were those promises ever real, or were they just performance? Because if a place becomes truly unlivable, people don't hesitate. They don't trend. They act. Now here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Bill Maher stepped into this conversation, and he didn't soften it. He pointed directly at a growing contradiction, one that's becoming harder to ignore with time. A video surfaced of a progressive candidate running for office in New Hampshire. Someone asking for power, while publicly asking where she could move to escape the very country she wanted to represent. She spoke about not wanting to be a problem, about finding a place that would accept her, and then said it clearly: she needed to get out. Think about that. Running for leadership, while planning an exit. That's not just frustration. That's a fracture in logic. Because leadership demands belief. Not blind optimism, but enough conviction to stay and fix what's broken. When the message shifts from "we can improve this" to "I need to leave this," something fundamental changes. And here's the twist most people miss. Criticism isn't the problem. Every country has flaws. The United States is no exception. Conversations about healthcare rankings, education gaps, and representation are real. They matter. Ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. But exaggeration? That's where perception starts to bend. Because when every issue is amplified to its extreme, reality gets distorted. Strengths fade into the background. Progress gets overlooked. And slowly, the narrative becomes heavier than the truth itself. So now the real question isn't, does America have problems? It does. The real question is, why do the same people who describe it as unbearable continue to stay, succeed, and seek power within it? That contradiction is the story. Because history is clear about one thing: when a country truly collapses under pressure, people don't debate leaving, they leave.
No announcements. No speeches. No trending hashtags.
Just action. And despite all the outrage, all the headlines, and all the promises, that moment still hasn't come. Which leaves you with something harder to ignore than any headline. If people aren't leaving, then maybe the reality isn't what it's being sold as. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Countries don't collapse because of criticism. They collapse when people stop taking responsibility. We don't need quitters. We need people who stay and fix it. That line cuts deeper than it sounds. Because it flips the entire narrative. What if the issue isn't that America isn't worth defending, but that too many voices have forgotten what they're actually defending? And that's exactly where Bill Maher doesn't hold back. He calls it out directly, labeling this mindset as entitlement without perspective. Harsh? Maybe. But it lands because it exposes a contradiction most people feel, but rarely say out loud. Because tearing down a system while benefiting from it creates tension you can't ignore. Think about it. The United States didn't become globally influential by accident. It built a system, imperfect, yes, but powerful. A democracy that still shapes global conversations. An economy that drives innovation. Institutions that, despite criticism, continue to function at a level many countries still aim to reach. And here's the part that changes everything. Millions of people are still trying to get in, not out. So when leaders amplify only the negatives, when every flaw is stretched to its limit, it starts to feel less like truth, and more like narrative engineering. Now pause here, because this is where the contradiction sharpens. At one point, data showed that a significant percentage of self-identified liberals admitted they had considered leaving the country. Not permanently, not immediately, but the thought was there. And yet, at the very same time, many of those same voices advocate for making the country more accessible, more welcoming, more desirable for others to enter. So which is it? Is it a place people should escape from, or a place people should strive to reach? That tension doesn't resolve easily. Because if a country is truly as broken as it's sometimes described, inviting others in raises serious questions. But if it still offers opportunity, growth, and stability, then why the repeated desire to walk away? That's the gap no one fully explains. And according to Bill Maher, the answer might not be purely political. It might be cultural. Because this pattern isn't limited to politicians, it extends to celebrities too. Names make headlines. Promises go viral. Miley Cyrus once said she would leave if Trump became president. It was definitive. Clear.
No ambiguity.
But time passed, and reality didn't match the declaration. And that's where perception begins to shift. Because when statements are made with certainty, but never followed by action, they stop feeling like conviction, and start feeling like performance. Now here's the deeper layer. Celebrities hold massive influence. Their words don't just reflect opinion, they shape it. And yet, too often, their messaging mirrors whatever dominates the political or cultural moment. When a narrative trends, they echo it. When a viewpoint gains traction, they amplify it. But rarely do they slow down and challenge it. And that's where the real frustration builds. Because with that level of reach comes responsibility. The responsibility to think critically, to add nuance, to question even the narratives that seem popular. Instead, what people often see is repetition, not reflection. And over time, that repetition starts to blur the line between genuine belief and scripted alignment. So now you're left with something bigger than politics, bigger than celebrities, bigger than headlines, a question that doesn't go away. If the loudest voices keep saying one thing, but living another, then what are we actually supposed to believe? What if the loudest opinions you hear aren't original at all? Because at some point, it stops feeling like debate and starts looking like repetition. The same phrases, the same outrage, the same conclusions. And that's exactly where Bill Maher leans in again and turns up the pressure. He doesn't just question the message, he questions the pattern behind it. Remember those bold promises from 2016? Eddie Griffin saying he'd move to Africa. George Lopez suggesting everyone would be heading back. They weren't subtle. They were designed to stick. But years passed, and nothing moved. And that's where the tone shifts, from statements to skepticism. Because when the same voices repeatedly escalate their language depending on who's in power, it starts to feel less like consistent criticism, and more like selective intensity. Critics argue that during some administrations, controversies were met with patience, sometimes even praise. But when the conversation turns to Donald Trump and his party, the language sharpens instantly. Stronger words, bigger labels, higher emotional stakes. So the question becomes, why does the standard change? Is it about principles or positioning?